for example, you mentioned not that they like any romantic comedies, or maybe I just mean that I, for one, am like a sucker for anything with aliens, so I'm more predisposed to like that. As writers, how do you feel? Do you let that affect what you write, or do you try to see it more objectively? And you don't need to talk about writing for yourselves, but to what extent do you bring the biases into it?
Well, I think that for me, it's impossible to sort of to separate the things that I like from, like a genre as a whole or something like that. I mean, I love horror movies, but I hate most horror movies. I mean, like I really do. Like I love horror movies, but like every time that I think that I'm like, because we're friends with a lot of people who are like very specifically horror film critics, and they write about it all the time. And I talk to them like every other week, and I'm like, "Did you like that?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, I thought it was great." And I was like, "Oh my god!" I was like, but at the same time, when I see a movie that I really do like, I just like that. Then I really try to champion it. I mean, I think that you're always going to have certain biases of things. I mean, I think Roger Ebert is, I think, predisposed to like movies that have like a really grand visual sweep, particularly with like special effects and stuff like that. I mean, he loves like Dark City. I think he really liked Avatar. I mean, but if you watch or he likes Alex Proyas. Like that's a filmmaker that he always likes, and he will give the benefit of the doubt to, whether it's because he's interviewed him or he just likes his movies and feels like there's a sort of creative kinship or whatever you want to call it. And I think that, I mean, he doesn't go like, I'm Alex Proyas' biggest fan, but I think that really if you can just be honest about sort of the aspect with which you like a certain genre. I mean, there isn't a genre that I like actively dislike. I dislike bad movies in any genre, but I don't. But if I become passionate about certain aspects of movies, then like I am always excited when I find that, and I'm disappointed when I find it either executed poorly or I don't find it.
Yeah, it makes you more enthusiastic and more critical, and I think that's not necessarily a bad thing.
What about the other side? Like the filmmaker's a total and utter jerk, and you don't want to like his films. Like for me, it's Julian Schnabel.
So you have beef with Julian Schnabel?
Oh man, all that crockery painting he did in the '80s, I'm really angry about it.
Well, I love the Diving Bell Butterfly.
I did too, and I didn't want to.
Well, I mean, like we've done interviews with people who are not the nicest people that you've ever met.
I've never disliked a person.
Well, that's because nobody's ever disliked you. So
Todd's got stories about like nightmare celebrities, nightmare people. But I think you've done a very good job of keeping that separate.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say. I mean, there are people who, like, I really do think are just bad filmmakers. But at the same time, like quite frankly, like I go into every movie, no matter what the genre, no matter who the filmmaker is, hoping that I will like it, not expecting to be disappointed. Like, I mean, I would love to be surprised every time I go to the theater that, this person who I did not, I mean, Gaspar Noé, I couldn't make it through more than 20 minutes of Irreversible. I just
That's
thought
the
it was,
hardest part of the film.
Yeah.
I just thought it was like unwatchable, and that's one of the very few movies that I've ever just not finished. But I went and saw Enter the Void, and I came out of it and I said, if it was 40 minutes shorter, it would have been a great movie. But with that 40 minutes, but at the same time, I didn't bring in the bias of actively not wanting to finish.
I think that those of us who are educators can understand that. You really, when you read that paper, when you look at that film, you really want it to be awesome, and it's through the critical lens that you start looking at things to make it better.
Yeah. I'll say at my school, I was an editor of my school paper, so I kind of know that print journalism is sort of, I don't want to say on its way out, but it's much easier to just go online and pick up an article. How do you sort of establish yourself online? I know I read Shut Off, and so I've read a lot of your stuff. I know you met with Viviana, and that's how you sort of got in. But how do you sort of establish yourself once you want to get into film criticism? Like, how do you get your name known and get jobs?
Well. I think the best way is to write as often as you can, and to write as much as much different kinds of stuff as you can. One, and then also to make sure that you don't devalue your work, because the more that you write for free, the more people will pay you nothing, because everybody wants content and everybody wants to pay for it. But if you make sure at some level that you are getting compensated for it, that prompts people to take you, quite frankly, to take you more seriously, because you can write for a site that does not pay anybody anything, and people know that, and so they'll be like, well, you write for free, like, you know, you could say I've written for them for 2 years or something like that, and they're like, well, you wrote for free, and that doesn't mean that you aren't a good writer, but it does mean that, you know, you don't necessarily value your work enough to sort of take enough of a stance to say, you know, I need to get paid in order to do this, and I think that will encourage, if not force, people to take it more seriously. But
writing for free at first can
Yeah.
be a very good way
Absolutely.
of establishing yourself in the online community.
Yes, you can.
So can of all things, Twitter can, because a lot of conversations now happen, at least within our circle, of writers and critics and journalists and even some filmmakers on Twitter. It connects a lot of people
Absolutely.
digitally that may not cross paths in real life. You can get to know people and get to know the ones who are smart about film and the ones who have great insights, whether or not they're being published right now. And I think that's a really good way of starting out and establishing yourself and establishing sort of a network, because I will say that most of my freelance gigs I've gotten through people that I know.
Yeah.
Even people that I know only on Twitter.
He's had his hand up.
Yeah, sorry. I'd be really curious to hear what the three of you think about the role of being a film journalist will be in the future, especially in light of the way that the internet's reshaping it. I know that Roger Ebert lamented the newspapers are cutting down on the length of film reviews, and it seems as if, as we go on, there's less and less of a societal appreciation of film criticism or film journalism, and I'd be really curious to see, I mean, not to, job security, but just what do you think the role of it will be in the film industry and for a society that wants to learn about movies and read about movies?
Well, and however qualified I am to say this, I think, we're kind of having this really painful experience as print, I'll say it, as print croaks, flat out dies, or comes very close to it, and things move online, that ultimately what people were identifying with in the newspaper or whatever format or whatever medium they were getting that criticism from, they're just looking for a filter. They're looking for someone to relate to or someone to recommend. I mean, that's what Facebook and Twitter and all these things are about. That's why Facebook is ultimately valuable, because, there's a billion pieces of content on the internet, so even one recommendation from one person you kind of know is enough to make something a little more valuable or a little more connected to you. So with we're part of the machine, so we're part of the marketing system. That role is going to continue to be there as the studios want people with audiences and people with voices to interact with their film. They don't just want you to watch a trailer. They want you to read a piece about somebody intellectualizing their film or talking about what their film could be. They want that. And as for reviews, I think people are always going to need someone to kind of give them a window or just give them an idea of what they're getting into.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the more that things move online, the farther we can reach people and tell people about films that they might not otherwise discover.
Do you think that in that dissemination of information, there's something lost though when we go towards more sound bites and small clips? Because I feel like it used to be that you pick up a paper and read a review, and now it's you go on Rotten Tomatoes and you see a number. And if you really want to dig deep, you can find the aggregate reviews. But are people looking at that?
Well, they should. I think the people who are interested in reading longer film reviews will go to Rotten Tomatoes, find reviews, hundreds of reviews. Not that I work there anymore. But each one of those blurbs, each one of those one-sentence blurbs links out to a longer piece. And online, the beauty of publishing online is that you don't necessarily have to have a word count. So you can have more space to explore a film. I think the people the readers, the viewers who are hungry for longer analysis can find it more easily now.
And I would just add to that I feel like the democratizing force of the internet is actually a really good thing for sort of a continuing appreciation of film. And as frustrating as it can sometimes be to interact with a readership who, you know, thinks you're an idiot because you like a movie that they didn't, or vice versa, you know, the fact that there are people who are passionate about film and who are passionate about discussing it, I think is always a good thing. Unfortunately, like, not everybody is knowledgeable, or in most cases, like, mature enough to actually have like a straightforward, calm discussion about movies. But I do think the fact that more and more people can watch movies and write about them gets more visibility for all different kinds of movies. I mean, you have people who are just devoting their own, they create their own blog where they just write about, you know, like grindhouse movies or martial arts movies or whatever kind of film they want. And there are people who write these massive essays about film. I do think, for me, like, I believe firmly that, you know, as much as you should have the freedom to write as long as you want, you should also have the restraint to write as short as you can, because the longer you write about something, you know, I think at a certain point a reader's just not going to be that interested in it.